JD Vance was interviewed by Theo Vaughn, and there were a couple really good clips that came out of it.
So was he? I wonder if he was expecting anything from Trump and they just couldn't figure it out. I don't know. I'm just curious about it. You know, I'm kind of like, you start to see how all this stuff kind of works, you know, and just like it's like,
yeah, I hear. I really do think he's disappointed about the bill. He's you know, he disagrees with some of the things that were in there. He's an emotional guy. Look, it happens to everybody. I've flown off the handle way worse than Elon Musk did in the last 24 hours.
Oh yeah.
But you know, my hope is comes back, says, look, made some mistakes. Didn't mean to say everything.
My controversial opinion here that's going to piss off a lot of people is that this kind of chummy rapport, this kind of back and forth coming from Theo Vaughn creates more potentially valuable journalism that could come afterwards than a million different pre-canned responses that you hear from the likes of JD Vance from talking to Dana Fash on CNN. He quite literally is, if you listen to the way he's navigating through this conversation, like, yeah, he glazes Trump for sure. And he even glazes JD Vance. He's not attacking him, but in the process, he's disarming him and asking him some fairly valid questions. I mean, from the dumb guy's perspective, for sure. But like, he literally asked, like, so what do you think is the alternative? You think Elon wanted something out of him? The way that a normal media person would ask this question to JD Vance in a super contentious environment would be, was there quid pro quo happening between the president and Elon Musk? That is what he's asking him. But he's asking him this question in a way where it's like, we're just bros. He's doing it in a charming and disarming way. And there's more to it. The reason why I'm saying that is because I think it's interesting because there's the Israel side of this conversation as well.
Let's smooth it out and let's all be friends because, again, like I care about the country and I think the country's better off if under the president's leadership, Elon's helping us out as opposed to fighting the administration. I don't want him to fight the administration. I know the president doesn't want that, but here we are.
Yeah, he just tweeted a little bit ago that he felt like 80% of the
negative consequence of this, however, is that you end up, I'm not going to say he's platforming JD Vance because like that's the vice president, okay? But he is humanizing JD Vance. And the vice president is not human, especially JD Vance. That is the negative consequence of that. Like I would never be like, he's platforming the vice president. No, the vice president is platforming Theo Vaughn. It doesn't work that way. Are you saying that Theo is in fact a genius pretending to be an idiot to obtain more info? I wouldn't say he's a genius, but I definitely do think he plays up the dumb guy aesthetic. But I think he's a very good conversationalist.
He listens to a ton of people. It's one of the more interesting things about his leadership style is if he's got a big decision to make, he talks to everybody.
Got it.
And I think it's why he's like in touch with normal people is because he doesn't just talk to like congressmen or people with a lot of money. He tries to talk to everybody. Like I've seen him ask the gardener at Mar-a-Lago what he thinks about a particular issue. I've seen him ask the people who work in the kitchen at the White House what they think about an issue. He's constantly trying to understand what other people are thinking.
Oh, I saw him ask a Scottish Terrier what kind of cakes they like, you know? So yeah, I agree with you. He's definitely always absorbing kind of information.
He is. Yeah.
Was Doge helpful?
It was. Yeah, it was. And I mean, look, Doge continues within the White House and within the executive of the country. I mean, look, there's a lot of ways in which we are wasting the American people's money.
Yeah.
Sometimes spending it on crazy stuff. Sometimes spending it on like actually counterproductive stuff. I think Doge has saved already.
Yeah, I mean, he ain't wrong. Someone in the show said he ain't wrong. The president takes policy prescriptions from television and movies. You're right. He did do that. He does do that. Insane to consider, but unfortunately, the truth.
At least 170, maybe $200 billion. Hopefully, it's going to save more. But yeah, I think it was very
so
worthwhile.
Much money.
That's a ton of money.
How would you not even notice that? If that much money,
there's so much I could tell you about this. Okay, so one of the crazy things we all figured out like first week or so we're in the White House, okay,
now we're entirely outside of Theo Vaughn's scope of knowledge. It's moved completely beyond anything that he knew about anything. So now it's open season for JD Vance to just lie. And this is where the conversation turns into a net negative.
There was a payment that should be stopped because the president signed an executive order to stop a payment. And this is like day one of the White House. We're like, okay, how do we stop this payment? Yeah. Because somebody's trying to make this payment and nobody knew where like the computer was that actually wired the money from the U.S. taxpayer to this entity.
God.
So dude,
yeah, of course he's lying. It's JD Vance. He's a vice president. He's been lying from the jump. But in the beginning, at the very least, there's like ways in which he was asking. If he followed up the Trump question that he had, like, oh, Trump and I have disagreements all the time. If he were to then be like, oh yeah, what'd you guys disagree on, dude? Something like that, then it would have been instructive. It would have been informative. His response or his lack of response to a question like that would be informative. But he didn't do that. At that point, it just turns into glaze. Out
of just grift in the federal government was off the charts. It's still it's getting better, but there's still a lot more I think we can find.
Who was getting it? I don't know. I don't know one person that was getting something extra. I don't think. Well, or unless everybody was slurping.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people were slurping. Man, you look at what. So, for example, there are all these humanitarian programs that we have where we send money for people, for medicine, for food.
Oh yeah.
Okay, but like I think. Like what I thought before I got in the government, what most Americans think is, okay, so we send $100,000 to this group to buy food for like poor kids in Africa, okay? And what actually happens is it's not $100,000 that go to the food for the poor kids in Africa.
Right.
That the NGO, the non-government organization that gets that money, contracts it out to somebody else.
Right. So
the worst thing I can say about this is that now it is officially the exact same as CNN. And maybe even worse because CNN doesn't at least like directly chummy up and cozy up the JD Vance and humanize JD Vance. But the neutrality and asking a question and then, just taking in whatever answer the vice president gives is exactly what you see in mainstream news. Then it turns into like uncritical glazing. I don't think that Theo Von is equipped enough to handle the counter narratives that JD Vance is pushing here by being like, oh no, it's just like they actually cut spending. Doge was so successful, it cut spending by billions. But Theo Von doesn't know it's bullshit. But the reality is CNN would not also turn around and say that's bullshit.
They subcontracted out some. There's like 3 or 4 middlemen. And what, Marco Rubio, who's the Secretary of State, he's a very good friend. What he told me is that his best estimate after he had his team look at it is that 88 cents of every dollar was actually being collected by middlemen.
No way.
So every dollar we were spending humanitarian assistance, 12 cents was actually making it to people who needed it. That's crazy. So there's a lot of waste, man, a lot of crazy stuff.
What I find really interesting about this is that like Theo Von has let his position be known that he believes that there's a genocide going on and we have to put an end to it, right?
There's a conflict that's been happening in the Middle East. People know about it. Between Israel and Palestine and some of the areas over there, the Gaza area they talk about. And I just think it feels to me, I don't know if it feels to me like it's a genocide that's happening while we're alive here in front of our lives.
And obviously, as someone who believes this, he also chooses to ask this question directly to JD Vance. Now, what's interesting about it is, and I tweeted this earlier, I said, a lot of people ask me what the Democrats get wrong about their independent media strategy. There are a million issues beyond messaging, but on the media front, a Democrat would never entertain having this conversation with someone like myself. The notion that the vice president at the time, Kamala Harris, would come on my show while the Democrats were conducting a genocidal campaign in Gaza as a belligerent, and then to have a conversation, have a back and forth like this on those grounds is unthinkable. No, that would never happen. You see what I'm saying? That would never happen. So I always wonder, it's like, what is it that these guys, the Republicans, like, they just don't care? I guess they do not give a shit. You know what I mean? They do not care. They will go on a show where someone will tell them to their face, like, hey, there's a genocide going on. To be fair, Theo is not you. He's obviously not an aggressive advocate for Palestine. No, he is. Brother, for as big of a platform that he has, are you kidding me? Listen, if it's impactful when Joe Rogan decides he is anti-trans women in sports, and we have an issue with that because of how impactful that is, you have to do that when someone with a platform that's closely resembling Joe Rogan's is unconditionally pro-Palestine. I'm sorry, you don't get to have it both ways. You can't on the one hand say Joe Rogan is so impactful when he's doing reactionary politics, and then turn around and be like, and Theo Von is not impactful at all when he's saying that like there's a genocide going on in Gaza. It doesn't work that way. It's either they're both incredibly and immensely impactful in political discourse, which I think they are. Horrible take, to be honest, King. This is simply incorrect. Dude, you're talking about a guy who had not only Bernie Sanders, but Gabor Mate on his broadcast.
I look at this stuff, I see these videos, I see the pictures, and it's very heartbreaking.
Wait, okay. So here's where the Israel stuff starts. Let's hear what he had to say.
Regular person on the street. I'm like, well, if this is the company, because you see videos of like horrific stuff online.
Sure. Very sad stuff.
And you're
stuff.
like, well, if this is the company we're hiring, how do I know that I might not be walking down the street and just a sniper bullet could hit me from them, you know?
So that is...
To be really honest with you.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. And I think the answer to that question is the only real protection that we have against that is that we've got to, elect the right people, and we've got to make sure that our government doesn't do crazy stuff. Because, look, any of this information can be misused. Like our government has your social security number, okay? Yeah. Using that information, the government could spy on you. The government could give your information over to an illegal alien to start a fake account in your name. And that, by the way, happens. I had a friend of mine who had an illegal alien steal his social security number. And when he went to the IRS to complain about it, they wouldn't give him information on the person who was stealing his stuff. And by the way, that's what we're trying to do, is make it so the IRS can talk to the Department of Homeland Security. But the only real protection against this stuff, I think, is to have a government that actually protects the rights of its citizens. And, we should all be worried about our privacy being invaded by the government. I think we should be just as worried about private corporations as we should be the government. I think, everybody can invade our privacy, but I don't, let me put it this way. I don't think that the solution to that problem is to pretend that the government doesn't already have this information. It just does.
Right.
You got to make sure it doesn't misuse it.
Got it.
And that's my view, at least, is we got to live in reality, and the government's already got this information. We just need to make sure they don't misuse it. And on the Gaza thing, just sort of chat about that for a little bit. I'm like a human being. So I look at...
You are not like a human being. You are not even like a human being. Also, notice how he didn't say, I'm a human being. He said, I'm something of a human being myself. I'm something of organic matter that you could maybe perhaps consider to be a human being. Maybe more worm than human being. Who knows? Human adjacent.
This stuff, I see these videos, I see the pictures, and it's very heartbreaking. And just since you brought it up, what we're trying to do here is try to solve two problems here. Okay, so on the one hand, you've got innocent people, innocent Palestinians, and innocent Israeli hostages, by the way, who are caught up in this terrible violence that's happening as we speak. Okay, and we're trying to get as much aid and as much support into people as humanly possible. That's one thing that's going on. The other side is Israel's attacked by this terrible terrorist organization. I think people sometimes forget that, right? They forget the thing that kicked this off is that we had this terrible terrorist attack, and you had a lot of innocent Israeli civilians die in that terrorist attack. And so I think what we're trying to do in the Trump administration with that situation...
Yeah, every part of this is a goddamn lie. It's pissing me off.
...is to get to a peaceful resolution. And I think the peaceful resolution looks something like this. You've got to give Israel confidence that Hamas is never going to attack them and kill a bunch of civilians. And then you've got to get as much aid and support into these innocent...
Oh, God, it's such bullshit. Jesus Christ. The White House lifted the freeze on 2,000-pound bomb shipments to Israel. Bombs are being used to strike displaced Palestinian shelter in makeshift tents, and approved over $12.5 billion in military assistance since taking office in January 2025. Podcaster Theo Vance tells Vice President J.D. Vance that it appears the United States prioritizes Israel's interests over America's and raises U.S. complicity in the Gaza genocide. Where is this part? I want to see this part. Is it coming up, or did I skip this part? Oh, it's coming up.
Israel-Palestinian debate is, I think it kind of degrades our humanity a little bit, because I've seen people on the left, mostly on the left, who will say, well, they'll completely ignore that Israel, all these innocent Israelis were killed in this terrorist attack. And then you have some people, usually on the right, who will completely ignore that there are kids who are caught up in this violence.
What is this?
And I think it's why the president has been, I call him the president of peace. It's not easy.
Do you have a say in it?
Yeah, of course. Well, the president's obviously the person who makes the final decision all the time. But yeah, we certainly, I think I'm one of the few people that he's talking to constantly. We're constantly, we're talking to the Israeli government. We're talking to people in the Arab world. We're talking to people in the Palestinian territories. We're constantly engaging in diplomacy.
What about Palestinians, man? What about people in the Palestinian territories? He didn't say Hamas.
Crazy things, dude, is This guy is a very dear friend of the president's. He's our special envoy to the Middle East. Steve Witkoff, he's a Jewish guy, very pro-Israel. He's done more to try to bring this conflict to a close than anybody. And you sometimes have people who say that they're pro-Israel who attack Steve for not being pro-Israel enough. And I think it's totally bogus. Like, I see this guy operate every single day. He actually is. Like, he's a Jewish guy who believes in the purpose of the state of Israel. He also is a guy with a heart who's trying to prevent the killing.
Yeah.
And I think there's...
Yeah, right. Get the f out of here. He is not preventing the killing at all. JD Vance, worried about the optics of not being pro-Israel enough. Yeah, but even this conversation that he's having, think about how different this conversation is than where a conversation like this would take place a year ago. Year and a half ago. He has to literally massage the idea that, oh, they want to stop an end. They want to put an end to this killing. We see how bad it is. I never in my life thought the Republicans would be lying in the same way that the Biden admin is lying. Like, think about it. The Republicans are trying to act like they're also pro-Palestine too. That's crazy. Under normal circumstances, a year ago, 2 years ago, Republicans would be sitting there being like, what do you mean? They're dogs. Like, they're rapist, barbaric, monstrous terrorists. They all need to be cleansed from the land. Hello? Israel is the most moral democracy on the planet. Excuse me, am Israel high? Like, that's crazy. Yeah, now he's gotten to, we're working tirelessly around the clock for a ceasefire. That's where he's at.
Like, when I talk about this whole debate has caused us to lose our humanity, I think of the people who are constantly going after Steve, because this is a guy, he's a father. He lost one of his...
Yeah, Steve Witkoff. He is a liar. Also, it's not Steve Witkoff. It's Donald Trump. It's JD Vance. The reality of the matter is Steve Witkoff is simply an envoy, okay? He doesn't make decisions on his own. He's just simply conveying the decisions that Donald Trump has made.
His own children because of an overdose, and he loves people. He believes in the value of human life, and he's doing a really good job, and he's one of the important people in the president's ear too.
Yeah, it seems like I've heard of Mr. Witkoff, but I never met him. But I
Good
like,
dude.
Yeah.
You should have him.
I think I think the tough thing just as a regular person, right? It's like we're seeing all these videos of people like picking up pieces of their children, and like,
of course,
it's the sickest thing I think it's ever been televised. Basically, if you consider watching something on your phone being
very
televised,
sad, man.
It feels like a massacre, and it feels like, you know.
Oh, it's very sad, man. Is it, dude? Well, you're something of a human, right? Like, you're kind of like a human. Oh, it's very sad.
For a guy, you're like, well, I'm paying these taxes, and they're going towards this, like, but you can't do anything, you know. Like, you can talk, you know, but it's like you can't. I don't understand how it becomes like tough for people. Like, sometimes it feels like we look out for the interests of Israel before we look out for the interests of America.
So let me say a couple things. So number one, like, I think you're a great dude.
I think Theo here, especially hitting sometimes it feels like we're looking out for the interests of interests of Israel before we're looking out for the interests of America. That's a great way. I think that's a great way to present it, especially to a right-wing audience. It's a great way to present it to a right-wing audience, his own audience.
Dude, so we don't always have to agree on everything. Do I think do I think it's a genocide? No. And here's the reason why I don't think it's a genocide.
Do I think it's a genocide? No.
Israelis are purposely trying to go in and murder every Palestinian. I don't think that's what they're doing. I think they got hit hard, and I think they're trying to, like, you know, sort of destroy this terrorist organization, and war is hell, and that is true. I also think it's true, man. I mean, I've seen people on my side of the political aisle. I'm a Republican. You know that, but your audience may not. Who, like, will see these videos of these innocent Palestinian kids and say, oh, well, they had it coming to them. No. Like, if you have a soul, your heart should break when you see a little kid who's suffering, which is why we have the policy that we have, which is we're trying to eliminate the conflict, eliminate the source of the conflict, so that we can actually bring some peace and some...
I think this is a horrible answer. I don't think this is a good answer at all from JD Vance. I mean, obviously it's not a good answer. They're never going to give a good answer. They're genocidal monsters. But having said that, I don't think this is the audience that's going to respond to it positively. I mean, Theo, stand strong in your convictions about genocide of the Israeli lobby. Proud of you for addressing the situation head on. JD is a politician and a lawyer through and through. He can lie and talk you out of anything you know to be true. Don't let him.
Some humanitarian assistance into people. And that's my basic view. And yeah, the president's interesting. He's a pro-Israel guy.
Yeah.
And he also recognizes that to bring any conflict to a close, you've got to talk to everybody.
Yeah.
And so, we've been attacked. I've been attacked. The president's been attacked for being too interested in diplomacy. And you ask, like, what can I do? I think that what people should demand is that if our tax dollars are going to something, we should be actively trying to fix it. Okay, that's kind of the way that I think about it.
What do you mean? I know it's limp-dicked. I know JD Vance's response is limp-dicked. He's gaslighting. His job here is to gaslight. Like, bull. Let's see how he responds.
And what happened with the Biden administration, man, it's crazy. They were spending so much money all over the world, they weren't engaged in diplomacy at all. So
he's moving on. And then he just he neutralizes and then moves on to and talk about Ukraine. Vance tries to mollify Theo Von on Gaza by telling him that the U.S. is diligently working to eliminate the conflict and bring some peace, which in practice means continuing to fuel the annihilation warfare until Israel's maximalist goals are
It's the
achieved.
sickest thing I think it's ever been televised, basically, if you consider watching something on your phone being
very
televised.
sad, man.
It feels like a massacre, and it feels like, I've called it a genocide. Other people have different thoughts about it, and that's fine, right? And I don't need anybody to share the same thoughts, or you two. But I think where it gets scary is that we give...
which is we're trying to...
we just watched the whole thing. Yeah, this is we're working tirelessly and ceaselessly around the clock for a ceasefire moment from the admin. We are responsible for what our taxpayer dollars do. Is beyond that. Like, you're talking about us as American citizens, and you're right about that. But these guys are active participants. Remember, they are the American admin. Just like the previous American admin that came before this one, they are directly responsible for this genocide. They are an active participant, an active belligerent in this ethnic cleansing campaign.
Dude, the Russia-Ukraine thing is the most vicious.
Yeah, he just moves on. Ugh, gross. He just moves on to Russia-Ukraine. At least Theo Von brought up the issue, but he's also not equipped to knowledgeably push back on Vance's obfuscation, which is a perk of appearing on these casual conversation podcasts. Yeah, that's the other side of this story, which is that Theo Von is not going to be able to and respond to this and be like, well, how do you say that when isn't that exactly what the previous administration said? You know what I mean? Or even with Ukraine, a knowledgeable person in the situation would then turn around and be like, okay, you think there's immense harm being done. Russia invaded Ukraine. How do you turn around and justify saying to the leader of a nation that has been invaded, that is our proxy in this conflict, that they haven't been thankful enough? Like, how is that solving the issue? How is that actually a matter of diplomacy? How is that the diplomatic approach undermining our proxy that one could even argue we have pushed into taking and making choices that perhaps were not favorable for their long-term standing? But I'm glad that comments weren't eating what they were saying. Bro, this is highly suspicious. They're doing crazy PR work to erase the situation. You should have asked Vance why the Epstein's list isn't out. Like, even what the Cash Patel was on Rogan today simultaneously, they got JD to be ready with the PR campaign in front of the mic. The Epstein list stuff is such catnip for the hogs. The Cash Patel conversation with Joe Rogan, I think, did more damage to the admin than it actually helped the admin. And it's perfect. It's a perfect for them. What Elon threw out there was nothing new, right? But he associated the administration's refusal in releasing the Epstein files with the administration's culpability, directly claiming that Donald Trump, their cult leader, is involved with Epstein, which now adds tremendous pressure. I think the Israel stuff and even like the administration's refusal to release, after actively fanning the flames of conspiratorial people to not lean into, after making claims that they were going to release the Epstein files, to refuse to release the Epstein files beyond what was already released, what the public already knew about. One of those like weird points of division that you wouldn't expect, maybe, that actually is quite consequential for a lot of radicalized individuals within the base. Interestingly enough.